A little while ago, I was out riding my bike and I got hit by a car. At the time, I had no idea what to do or who to turn to for help. I had heard of an organization called BikeLaw, and Patrick is the force behind BikeLaw in Canada. Patrick, can you tell us a little bit about BikeLaw?
BikeLaw was started back in 1998 in the United States. It was a collection of lawyers that shared a common value to be cyclists that represent injured or killed cyclists. And more importantly, they're a group or an organization that share a common value that we want change to the system so that bike and people who cycle are protected in the future.
What should you do at the accident scene?
There are no accidents. The coroner's review did a complete, thorough investigation of cycling fatalities as well as pedestrian fatalities and came to one simple conclusion: they're all preventable. So there absolutely is no accidents. These are crashes, and they're at the responsibility of an individual who caused them. The first thing you should do is take care of yourself and make sure you're safe and out of harm's way. Secondly, 911 should be called immediately in order for an emergency response team to attend.
What kind of documentation at the scene should we be concerned with?
At any crash scene, it's very important that you do have someone or yourself document information. Information such as the plate of the car, damage to the vehicle, where the vehicle is located after the crash, your bike, where your bike was located, as well any damage to the bike. You should also get photographs of the scene area. That includes if there's any defect in the roads, potential potholes, any bad signage, because there may be responsibility as well that there's a lack of infrastructure or there wasn't proper traffic calming measures. In addition, and if able, to make sure you access all the information from the driver, including the driver's name, their policy number of insurance, and their plate. If there are witnesses present, it's very important to take down their names and their contact information so that you can contact them potentially at a later stage. Police have responsibilities. They should attend the scene. They should do an investigation, but don't count on the investigation being necessarily thorough. They may speak to certain witnesses, but not all.
So what do you need to do once you get to the hospital?
Your primary focus is on yourself, your health, and the medical team around you in getting better. But as well, you should be proactive within the hospital system in making any appropriate requests and follow-ups. It's also very important that you provide them with a full understanding of all your complaints and injuries. Sometimes you will focus on the most significant one. However, it's very important that you let them know all the complaints that you have at that time. Inside the hospital, the medical professionals may ask you information about what happened in order to assist in their medical care for you. Obviously, share the information that they're required. However, it's not necessary for you to give a full detailed explanation of what happened at the crash site. That will be provided later on. Whatever you say during the course of your hospital visit is being documented and will be forming part of a record. Outside of medical professionals and rehabilitation professionals and your friends and families, you may be visited by other individuals. For instance, the police may attend. They may be seeking information or statements from you. Depending on the circumstances of the crash, you may or may not wish to give that to them. If it's a statement, it's very important that you seek legal representation before you provide it. In addition, insurance adjusters may attend. Some of the insurance adjusters' primary purpose is to obtain a statement from you to use it against you at a later date. It's very important that you don't provide any information or statements to insurance adjusters that visit you. As well, and unfortunately, you may be approached by lawyers or people on behalf of lawyers regarding trying to get you to give them your case. It's very important that you don't communicate with these individuals. Any lawyer that does that is acting contrary to the rules and regulations of the Law Society, and in all likelihood, they're not a very good lawyer.
I'm Jessica Speaker. I work as a personal trainer in Toronto. I woke up in the emergency room, dazed and very confused. The day after that happened, I thought about retaining a personal injury lawyer.
So why didn't you go for one of those big lawyers who advertises?
I actually checked them out. I called up and I had a consultation with them, and it was both very impressive and very repulsive because they sent a driver in a Rolls-Royce Ghost, so they're spending their money on fancy cars and chauffeurs, which isn't the best sign. And after meeting with the lawyer, I didn't have a very good taste in my mouth. The retainer rate was very high, which means that if there's a settlement, you're not going to see as much that's going to personally benefit you. And it just seemed very hustly and not straightforward and not very honest. The really great ones who are working in a fair way for you don't need to advertise on the back of a bus.
What advice would you give a cyclist who's been in a car crash?
I have two main pieces of advice. Number one is to find legal help because it's essential in so many ways. They help you with your insurance, which is generally designed to be a nightmare. All of that important stuff. But number two is to look after your own emotional well-being. So part of the benefits that you should have access to with your claim are counseling. You can talk to somebody who can really help you emotionally process what's happened to you. It's quite traumatic to be injured by a vehicle, and there are so many ugly parts of the process that it's very important to look after your emotional well-being along with your physical well-being.
It's very important to understand that not everybody needs to retain a lawyer in the system. There are certain things that happen in relation to the nature and extent of your injuries, as well as the injuries caused, that may not require you necessarily to have a lawyer. A good lawyer will tell you that. In this day and age, it's very difficult to find good lawyers. Take a look at peer review sites, sites that have other lawyers vote in relation to other lawyers they would recommend.
But if they don't charge you unless they actually win your case, they must be good.
That doesn't mean they're good. Anybody who practices in this area of the law will offer you the exact same guarantee. The majority of them work on contingency basis, and that is something that all lawyers, good or bad, will offer you.
What is a contingency fee?
Contingency fees are essentially where you are charged at the end of the case based on the success of the case. It's a percentage that the lawyer will charge you once the settlement funds are received.
So isn't it in the lawyer's best interest to collect as much money as possible on your behalf?
It absolutely is in the lawyer's best interest and your interest to receive fair and reasonable compensation, whatever that may be. However, some lawyers do not invest much money into the case and don't spend on disbursements and other things to build the case up. You have to be very careful as to which lawyers you hire, since some will fund the case and make sure that the appropriate experts are retained, whether they're engineers, medical professionals, or accountants.
So what happens if your bike is damaged or destroyed in the crash?
If your bike's damaged or destroyed in a crash, the person who's at fault is responsible to pay for the bike. For instance, if it's the driver that caused the crash, it's their insurance company that should compensate you for the loss of your bike. You would simply get the original receipts of your bike, or as well get a proper appraisal from a bike shop, submit that to the insurance company of the driver, and you ought to be compensated for that. If they don't compensate you, you have the option of taking them to small claims court. Many people are under the mistaken impression that they should be making those claims through their own home insurance. You should not. The proper claim is at the party that's at fault. If you do make the claim to your home insurance, you could have premiums go up later on under that policy for you. They may ask you to file or sign what's called a full and final release. It's very important when you have that document that you read it, and the document only applies to releasing them from the damage to your bike. There are times where companies will put in the release a waiver that you will not be able to sue them for any bodily injury. So when you take a look and you settle your damage to your bike, make sure any release you sign solely applies only to the property damage to your bike.
The insurance company sent me a bunch of forms to fill out in order to claim for my injuries. What's that all about?
The insurance company will send you what's called an accident benefit package. It contains various forms that you have to complete. It'll include an application for accident benefits, and as well as treatment plans that treatment professionals fill out in order that you can obtain treatment that you need. If you have questions, you can always call the insurance adjuster and make inquiries as to the proper completion of the forms. The amount of benefits that are available are really dependent on the nature and extent of the injuries. The way the system works is they categorize them into 3 different distinct categories. 1, minor injuries, 2, non-catastrophic injuries, and 3, catastrophic injuries. Minor injuries would include strains, sprains, essentially things where you don't suffer a fracture, you don't suffer a brain injury, and there's no broken bones or other associated problems. Catastrophic injuries include amputations, severe traumatic brain injuries, quadriplegia, paraplegia, as well as large whole body impairments. A non-catastrophic injury is really an injury that's not considered to be minor or under the minor injury guidelines, nor is it severe enough to be categorized as catastrophic. It can include fractures, it can include certain mild traumatic or moderate traumatic brain injuries, it can include various neurological conditions, it can include disfigurement, dismemberment, and other associated injuries. It's really a wide spectrum. If you're struck by a driver who doesn't have car insurance, where do you go for your benefits? Unfortunately, you have to go to the Motor Vehicle Accident Fund. It's a fund that's set up where there's no insurance available to pay for the benefits. That being, the cyclist does not have auto insurance and the vehicle that struck you doesn't have auto insurance. If a matter goes to trial, there may be an issue as to who's responsible for the injuries or the death. In those circumstances, arguments can be made by both sides as to who's at fault. Was the driver at fault 100%? Or was the cyclist partially at fault? Or was the cyclist 100% at fault? You do at times have defendants trying to make the argument that the cyclist or the pedestrian wasn't wearing bright fluorescent clothing and therefore they're partly responsible for being hit. It really is a system of victim blaming that detracts from the primary cause of these collisions and crashes. If you're in a vehicle and you have difficulty in seeing what's ahead of you, you're going too fast. You're responsible to drive that car so that you see objects in front of you at all times. For an injury or wrongful death case, it can take definitely years. Unfortunately, we have a system that's backlogged. The last priority to given within our court system, believe it or not, are civil personal injury and wrongful death cases. In Canada, unlike the United States, we don't have pain and suffering claims that are in the millions of dollars. Our Supreme Court has capped pain and suffering to $340,000, and that is reserved for the most severe of cases. For instance, quadriplegia or severe traumatic brain injuries. Other areas where people can make claims and lawsuits is for loss of income or loss of earning capacity. And that's really calculated based on the inability of the person to earn money that they could have earned if the crash didn't occur and the injuries weren't sustained. In cases where you find that there are multi-million-dollar awards, in all likelihood, those cases involve somebody with very severe injuries. Injuries that means that they need people to help them throughout their life for various care. In the majority of cases, those cases are settled and they're resolved once all the reports are generated, the parties meet, there's negotiation, there may be a mediation, there may be a pretrial, it may even settle at the doorstep of the court. It may have to go to trial. But essentially, 95% of the cases are resolved before that time, but it's really dependent on making sure that the proper experts are retained, the proper reports are submitted, and the proper quantification and calculations are done. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I can tell you it's much better to have your health than to have a good lawsuit. And no matter what type of lawsuit you have, it will never fully compensate you for what they took away from you. They're responsible to pay you what's reasonable and fair and what is just and right. No more, no less.
Thanks for all your help and advice, Patrick.
Thanks, Saul.
Go out there and have a great ride.